Can you focus on me? Baby, can you focus on me? Peace and blessings, guys. It is the Queen of Spades, and today I want to talk on a little bit more of a serious subject matter. So the caption is How I Escaped um, a Sexual Predator at the Age of 10. So I'm going to get right into it. When I was about 10 years old, I had two best friends, and they were sisters, biological sisters. And we all called ourselves sisters. And we shared secrets. We went, to the same places all the time. They were also um, involved or going out daily to the place of worship that I went to. And we always met there. We always sat together. We always giggled and talked about things that young girls talk about. And we were always very open, honest, and loving of one another. I remember distinctly being kind of close with their family. I felt like they were kind of close with mine too. Um, it started, with something that was so simplistic, so small. Like every time I saw them and their family, um, their father would say, peace, Medina, um, you're just such a good girl. Like, you're so intelligent. You're always, um, found, studying and reading, like just beautiful. Like, I'm sure your parents are proud of you. And I'm like, thank you, and didn't think much of it. So over time, every time I see them, you know, everybody would speak, but it was their, father who would, compliment me. And I had a crush on one of their, brothers. But I kept it to myself because I was so shy back then. But over time, it began to get like every time when you pull up to, your place of worship, the men would come and they would open the door for the women if they were, alone, you know, um, didn't have a mate with them at the time or their husbands or whatever, or they were single, they would come and open up the door for them. So my father, he'd always jump out, and sometimes he'd get my door and then my mother's door. So I'm sitting on the same side as him. Um, or if the brothers got out there faster than he could get out the car, then they would, open my door and he would go and get, my mother's door. So um, in a few occasions, um, it started to become more often than not, where when we pull up, my friend's father, would come and open the door for me. And I'd get out, thank you, sir, and I'd go on into the place of worship and wait for my parents. Um, while inside, at some point, he would come to me and he would just come up and start talking like, you are just such a beautiful girl, very intelligent. You carry yourself well, you know, um, you could tell that you were raised right, like your mom and dad did a good job. And I'd be like, oh, thank you. Not thinking anything of it. Then it started to become like every time, every time we pulled up, he'd run and jump and open my door. My father would go and open my mother's door. Um, And as we're walking into the place of worship, he's like, such a beautiful girl. Like, just the way that you carry yourself, like, you carry yourself like a young lady. I know your parents are proud of you. Like, I wish my girls was more like you. You need to teach them what you know so that they can grow up, and be, nice, intelligent young ladies, like you. And I'd be like, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Wouldn't say much and go on about my business to meet my best friends. Wouldn't think nothing of it. Then the next time, same thing. Next time, same thing. Next time, same thing. It got to the point where I started to feel a little uncomfortable. But I'm like, well, why do I feel uncomfortable? As a child, I'm thinking, it's really nothing for me to feel uncomfortable about. Why do I have like this sinking feeling every time I see him? Like, I started to avoid him. So, like, he'd open my door and I would purposefully wait for my parents. Um, and then we'd all go inside together. Or I'd run in and go directly where the other girls and children were instead of, just going inside without my parents. I started to avoid him. And it got to the point where, like, if I'm walking in one direction in our place of worship and I see him coming in my direction, I'm going the other way because he wasn't just saying that every time, like, he opened my door and escorted me into the place of worship. He would say this like every time he saw me, like if I'm walking in a direction and he's coming, in my direction, my way, he'd be like, just such a beautiful girl. Like, I know your parents are proud of you. You're going to make somebody a proud wife one day. And he repeated these things and it began to feel a little creepy, a little off to me. Part of me as a child was like, well, he's just being nice. He's just being polite. The other part of me was like, why does he keep repeating these things to me? Like, it's getting to be a little creepy, like almost like he liked me or something. Like, and I'm thinking that, but then at the same time, I'm like, no, that's not the case. I mean, he's married, these are my best friend's father. So, nah, wherever that feeling came from, I rebuke you. Like, I'm thinking to myself, like, no, that's something else. It's not like that. He's just being polite. So I ignored it. Never said anything to my friend girls until a later time. Um, Definitely wasn't going to bring it up to my parents because I know how crazy they can be. And I didn't know if even what I was feeling was an accurate way to feel. I didn't trust my feelings, even though they were my feelings. I didn't trust it, and that's a problem that we have. Um, some of it, is due to us being young, immature children. We're thinking that we can't trust our feelings because it just sounds and feels so ridiculous. When we actually sit down and examine our thoughts, we're thinking that's ridiculous to feel that way, but it's not. If you're having a feeling or a thought, more than likely it is the truth. And you can't judge at that age as to if something is ridiculous or not. That's why we have parents. That's why we have adults and guardians around us. And at that point, when you're feeling a certain type of way, you should tell somebody. You should tell, particularly an adult or a guardian that's in your life, or a parent, because we hide things a lot. And then in our culture as a people, a lot of things are swept under the rug. They're not dealt with, but you can't really blame anybody if you don't tell anybody. So I encourage us to start speaking up when you feel something. So it went from that to I would always call my friend girls and call them on the phone, you know. And they didn't have phones back then. We're young, so in that decade, like you don't have your own phone. You have the house phone you can talk on. So I called them on the phone, and at first, sometimes more than likely they would answer, or an older brother would answer, older sister, their mom, sometimes their father. And they'd be like, "Oh, okay, hold on, Medina. Let me get them on the phone." We talk and we laugh. They'd be like, "Okay, I gotta get my homework done. I'll call you later." I'd be like, "Okay, all right, I'll talk to you later." At some point, I would call and only their father would answer. And I'd ask him, "Can I speak to such and such?" First, "Hi, how are you?" The polite thing, like, a young lady's supposed to do, "Hope all is well. Can I speak to my friends, such and such and such and such?" And he's just like, "Oh, well, they're doing their homework right now. You know, Call them back, in a few minutes. They may be done then." So I'm like, "Okay." So I hang up. Nothing to really think much about that. I call back and he answers again. And he's like, "Hey, Medina, they're actually still doing their homework. And then when they finish, they have to do their chores. Give them about 15 minutes and then call back." So I'm like, "Okay." 15 minutes, 20 minutes passes. I call back. So then he answers again and he's like, "Hey, Medina, actually, they're finishing up with their chores, but they've got some other things to do for their mother. Why don't you give them a call back tomorrow around the same time?" So I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, "Is there any way that I could just speak with them like really quick? It'll only take a second." He's like, "Well, they're kind of busy right now, but as soon as they finish up, I'm gonna tell them to call you." I'm like, "Okay, okay, yes, sir." So I hang up with him. Next day, same thing. Hang up with him. The next day after, same thing. Hang up with him. The next day after, the same thing. Until one day I called and he's like, "Hey, Medina." And I was like, "Hey, how are you? Are my friends, available today, to talk with me?" And he's like, "Oh, unfortunately, right now," like it would always be something that they were busy with. He could never put them on the phone with me. And this happened like quite a few times, enough for me to start noticing, like, why aren't they available all of a sudden? And it's like he was purposefully keeping them away from me. Like he was scared maybe I was going to tell them something about how he was interacting with me. But I'm a kid myself, and I'm not really sure that the vibes that I'm picking up are accurate. I'm thinking, like, maybe I'm miscalculating somewhere. Until this one particular day that I called and I said, "Hey, can I speak with my friends? Are they available?" And he's like, "Well, they're around the house doing some things that me and their mother have them doing, but um, you can talk to me. We can talk. You can have a conversation with me until, they get finished." That's when I really started to feel weirded out. Like, since when? Like, why would you want to talk to me? I'm just a kid. Like, as an adult, don't you have better things to do, than to talk to a kid? That's what I'm thinking. Like, why? Like, I mean, I get that I'm intelligent and I carry myself well, and I'm just this model little girl, to you. However, I'm not calling for you. I'm calling for my friends. It was just crazy. It was a very crazy feeling and vibe that I was getting from him. And even at that point, I still didn't trust my intuition. I still didn't trust myself. I'm thinking, maybe, maybe I'm not thinking that way. Yeah, I mean, maybe he's not thinking that way. And I'm also thinking, maybe I gave off the vibe that I'm a cool person for him to talk to, so he feels comfortable. Like maybe I made him think it's okay to talk to me like this, and want to conversate with me as opposed to um, letting me talk with my friends. There was the next time I called once more just to make sure that I wasn't misreading things. And I called and asked for my friends again, and he's like, "Well, they're kind of busy, but I'm available. You want to talk with me? Um, we can chat until they get finished, and then, or we can chat, and then I'll tell them to call you back afterwards." And I'm like, "Well, it's okay because I have homework to do too." And he was like, "Oh, okay." He was like, "Well." He was like, "You not doing your homework now, you on the phone." Like, you know, um, he was like, "Do your parents know that you calling, your friend girls instead of doing your homework?" And I was like, "Yes, they do. But they allow me to talk, on the phone or watch TV for a little bit before doing my homework." And he was like, "Oh, okay. So you got time? Like you want to talk to me for a little bit until they finish?" And I was like, "No, sir, my mother's calling me right now, so I gotta go." And he's like, "Oh, okay, all right, well, give him a call back later then." And I'm just like, this is so weird. So I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell anyone. There was this other little girl who the three of us were friends with. She called me. Um, she called me maybe not too long after I got off with him. And I have something on my lip. Okay, problem solved. My lipstick peeling. But anyways, um, she called me and she's like, "Hey Medina, how you doing?" I'm like, I'm okay. And she's talking about her day. She's talking about these guys she likes and different things like that. And I cut her off and I was like, "I need to ask you something very important." And she's like, "Well, okay." I was like, "You got to promise not to say anything to anybody because I don't really know if this is the case or not, but I just have a feeling. And if I was mature, then I would have taken that feeling to an adult or my parents, not a child, you know. But things happen." So she's like, "Okay, I promise, I promise." So I was like, "Have you ever experienced calling our two friends and their father picking up, kind of seeming like he'd rather talk to you than to let you talk to your friends? Like, does he ever keep you from talking to them or say all the time like they're doing homework or chores?" And she was like, "No. Every time I call, I get to speak with them." And I was like, hmm. I was like, "Has he ever come up to you while we're at worship and say, like, you're a beautiful girl, you're very intelligent, anything like that? Ever compliment you?" And she's like, "No, never." And I'm like, "Okay." So now I'm realizing that this is an isolated incident with just me, and he's repeatedly doing and saying these things. Um, so now I'm kind of like a little like shook, but at the same time, still not sure if what I'm perceiving and picking up energetically from him is what the situation really is or not. So she was like, "Has he done that to you?" I was like, "Yeah, he has." And she was like, "Oh, I'm sure it's nothing. I'm like, "Yeah, maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's nothing at all. Maybe I'm just looking too much into it." So she's like, "Okay, well, I'm gonna call you back." And I'm like, why is she getting off the phone so quickly? Like, that was like a like a warning flag to me right then and there. Something told me like she was going to tell somebody. I instantly regretted telling her. Um, so she told her mother everything that I had divulged to her. Her mother went and told the rest of the congregation. So as a result, my parents still don't know. Um, by the time I got to worship that weekend on Sunday, all the adults were like eyeing me, like, you know, I guess maybe looking to see if what was said or spread around was the truth, maybe looking at me to detect non-innocence in the situation, maybe looking at me to detect if I would fabricate or make up things about a person, maybe just trying to fill me out energetically to see if it was capable of being the truth, which is really sad because, yes, children do lie, and little girls, and well, I know for sure, little girls can make up things just like adult women can make up things, just like little boys can make up things, just like adult men can make up things. But in a lot of cases, we're always so quick to look at the child and say, oh, well, she was hot in the ass. She's fast. She brought that on herself. But what happens when you're not that type of little girl? And people really don't have nothing to say because you don't exude those types of tendencies. Doesn't mean you can't potentially grow into that. But at that moment in time, I wasn't exuding those types of qualities. Doesn't necessarily make you a bad person or an evil person if you are, but I wasn't necessarily exuding those types of qualities. So what could they say? All they could do was stare at me. I went in and I spoke to my friends after noticing all the eyeballs on me, and they didn't speak back. They just turned away from me. And at that point, I'm like, why are they acting this way towards me? And I see the girl that was our friends, our friend that I spoke with about the situation. And she saw me and she was staring at me too. And she turned away from me. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, so that's when I put two and two together. Like, okay, so she told them, and now none of them are speaking to me. And then I'm like, wait a minute, does everybody here know? You know, my parents, they get called into a meeting. Little do I know it's about the situation. My parents came out of that meeting. They're like, come on, we're going home. We never left early. In fact, we always stayed late. So I knew that they knew now. Something was wrong. Something was up. We got home and they were like, Medina, come here, come to our room. So I'm like, okay. I come to the room and they're like, what's the situation with your friend's father? I'm like, somehow in that situation, it was shameful to me. Somehow I began to feel guilty about the situation as if I had done something. And I hadn't done anything, not a damn thing. But I felt guilty and I felt shameful. And in return, I'm protecting this person, but I'm not seeing it like that as a child. I'm looking at it like I shouldn't tell because like my thoughts could get this person messed up. And that may not be the case. Like I may just be feeling that or thinking that way. but that may not be the case because this person seems like a really good person. Like, they couldn't possibly be thinking that way or feeling that way about me, could they? So I go into the room with my parents and they ask me, what is the situation? So I just did a deep breath. Because I knew this was going to be a long conversation. I told them, all the things that I felt from him and the things that he was saying to me. And my mother was like, I've taught you about, since you were a little girl, if somebody touches you, if somebody says the wrong thing to you, to come and tell us. Why didn't you come and tell us this? And I was like, but he didn't say anything sexual to me. He didn't mention sex. He just was saying like how pretty and intelligent and beautiful I was and how I'd make someone a good wife one day. He kept saying that over and over again. And then when I called to speak to my friends, he still didn't say anything sexual. He just kept saying, they're doing something, or they're doing this, or they're doing that. You want to just talk with me until they finish? So he didn't mention sex to me. So that's why I didn't think it was important enough to say to you, because I didn't want him to get in trouble if it wasn't anything big or major, you know. And they're like, they're angry because my logic from a 10-year-old standpoint of view makes sense. He didn't mention the word sex. He didn't try to feel or touch on me. Not at that point in time. He never got the chance to. But he was, in fact, trying to condition me and make me comfortable enough to make a move on me, as predators normally do. So they were angry. They were like, he clearly was coming on to you, and he was being inappropriate with you as an adult. He should have never even repeatedly said those things. And I said, but sometimes when I felt weird about it, sometimes you all would come into the room and he would say, Medina is just such a beautiful, such an intelligent girl. She's going to make somebody a great wife one day. And I looked at y'all and y'all didn't have any type of reaction to it. You just said, thank you. We try to raise her right. And y'all didn't get angry or feel any type of way about what he said. So I didn't think anything was wrong with it. I just thought maybe I was overreacting to the situation. And my mother was like, that's because we didn't know he was repeatedly saying that to you and saying that to you alone when we weren't around. An adult talking to another adult. Adults talk about their children all the time and how smart or not so smart they are, how intelligent and how not so intelligent our children are. But we didn't know that he was repeatedly saying these things to you. And we definitely didn't know that you were calling them and he was offering to have a conversation with just you and that he wasn't letting you speak to your friends. And they asked me like, questions like, how often did that happen? How many times did that happen? It was crazy. So to make a long story short, I remember my friends who now at the time are as of right then and there were no longer speaking with me. Their mother came up to my mother in front of me and she said, I believe her. I believe Medina. And I was like, she does? Wow. Thought she hated me because of all the stuff that came out. I just knew she wouldn't have believed me because she's his wife and she's the mother of my two best friends. So my mother is like, well, she pulled her to the side away from me. And She's like, why are you saying that? Why do you believe her? Like, what makes you believe her? So she was like, because he's been cheating on me with younger girls for a while now. And I tried to hold the marriage together. I tried to hold it together and thinking that, he would stop cheating on me and come to his senses at some point. But then there were other signs, where like it was eventually brought out, like she didn't even feel comfortable leaving my friends at home with him anymore. They went wherever she went. And there were things that came out where, like, he would walk into each of the children's rooms when they were asleep, like even the girls, and he would touch them in a way where it was like sexual. And then he'd walk out the room to the next child. And my friend's older sibling, he had touched her. But she was too old to just be nonchalant where the situation was concerned. Like she knew that he had crossed the line. So she went to her mother about it. And he was just like, oh, I was going into all of the children's rooms just to feel and touch the bed and make sure that no one had peed on themselves. A girl that old, you feel like it's okay for you to touch her to see if she had peed on herself in her sleep. You couldn't just call her name. You couldn't just ask her. This is not a baby we're talking about. These are older children that can speak to you and can pretty much see for themselves if they have peed in the bed or not. At that point, it was confirmed for me that what I was feeling was not just my imagination, and I wasn't overreacting. He really was a creep. He really was a pedophile. And I dodged a bullet because there were many times where I wanted to, when they had sleepovers, I wanted to go to their house. And I couldn't. My parents did not agree with sleepovers at all. I used to be like, y'all are so old and boring. Like, all the other kids are having fun. You never let me go and have sleepovers and have fun. They never would allow it. They never would allow it. When I look back on it today, it's because of those dumb rules that I was saved and I was protected. My father and his friend went to go look for him. They went to go see him about that. He knew that they were looking for him and he disappeared. And he stayed gone for a very long time. I asked my father what would he have done if he saw him, or he's just like, well, you don't need to know all that. I gather now as an adult with my own children, fucked him up over his daughter because that's crossing the line in a major way. Like, I'm trusting you as a fellow brethren and you're hitting on my 10-year-old daughter. Like, that's enough for someone to get their ass whooped over. That's more than enough. So whatever his reaction would have been, it would have been warranted. Because to steal the innocence of a child, that's worse than slaughtering them. You have killed them. You have killed them inside and out. They will grow up to never be that same innocence again. You have violated them in the most vile way possible. and you've stolen their innocence. In my opinion, the repercussions for that type of act is death. There is no other way to handle or resolve a matter like that. But I was saved and I was spared. And I believe that I was. I believe that I was because it was meant for me to go on in sound mind and do great things. Maybe I wouldn't have made it from that psychologically or mentally. I may not have been able to get past that. There's a lesson in this. There are people that are sick out there. Either they had been molested or touched on themselves. So as a result, you either become the victimizer or the victim or neither. You shy away from both of those roles. But in some cases, when you are victimized at a young age, sometimes you grow up to do the same thing to other people, hurt people, hurt people. And that's in no way, shape, or form an excuse for that type of BS at all. But it helps you to understand the psychology of a person's thinking and why they would think that that type of action is okay. Because it was made to seem okay to them whenever they were violated. We need healing. I'm purging this experience right now, and I'm releasing it because for years it affected me in a negative way. I can only imagine how it would have affected me if he actually got to touch me, if he actually made it to touching me, or if he actually did more than just words. His words and the energy were more than enough to penetrate my sense of security and safety. I can only imagine how fucked up I'd be if it had went further than that. And I'm thankful every day that the situation was stopped and I was not touched physically by him. I'm thankful every day for that. We have got to make it very plain and clear to our children what is inappropriate, what is not. Somebody as an adult can be very cunning as to not ever mention the word sex or, anything related to sex per se, but they're giving off a sexual energy. We've got to be clear with our children. I'm very clear with my children. But we also have to be not so crazy in their eyes where they feel like intimidated to tell us things because, oh, mommy gonna snap off or daddy might kill somebody if I tell them this. We have to let them to know that we're here for their best interest and all we can do is our best as parents. I'm thankful for that experience. I've learned to become thankful for that experience because for a long time, the way that it affected me personally was me being afraid to be alone, like with the opposite sex, because they may come on to me or they may try to do something to me. Me being afraid to be out alone because the opposite sex may do something to me or say something to me inappropriately. It brings about and breeds fear, uncertainty, insecurities. Thank God it didn't go further than that. I'm so thankful to this day, but I'm also thankful for the experience because it taught me how not to allow a predator to get within loopholes and be able to still get to your children. As you telling them, be careful of this, be careful, watch out for this. If anyone says this to you, you've got to be clearer than that because they're adults, so they're more cunning. Predators are not stupid. We have to understand that. And we have to be more clear with our children when we explain things like that to them. We also have to be more protective of our children, more security minded with our children. I'm not saying drive them and yourself crazy by watching them every second of the day, but we've got to do better because these things, that are happening in today's time, listen, it wouldn't be able to happen if we were on our P's and Q's as parents. Because at the end of the day, these children are our responsibility. Yes, children will find ways to do whatever the hell they want to do when they want to do it. However, at the same time, you've got to have a level of responsibility and control where your children are concerned. You can be their friend and still be their parent. I do it all the time. I'm their friend to an extent, but at the end of the day, they know I don't play. And that's just the bottom line. They know I don't play, and they know I'm crazy about them, and I'll protect them at any means necessary. So we can be friends when we're going out bonding and going to the movies and the mall and things of that nature. But when it comes to my parenting and I'm guiding you, like, I also guide them and teach them in a way where I let them know the particular ins and outs of a particular decision that they can make in life. Because at the end of the day, parenting is not all about control. We have to make our children aware in their thinking. Like, we have to train them up to be great thinkers. Because one day they'll be someone's parent. We have to train them up to know, hey, you can make these decisions. You can make this type of decision. But these are the types of paths it may lead to. Now, you choose. And I'm not talking about when they 1 through 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Like, you still got to put your foot down. As a parent, you still got to protect your children. I really feel like my parents tried to prepare in the best way as possible to protect me from predators like that. I don't think that they even knew just how slick and conniving and cunning those predators could be. I don't think they even realized. So, you've got to be the balance. If you're too harsh, too strict on your children, you will run them to things that you didn't desire for them to be involved with. That may potentially hurt them. If you're balanced, then you can help them to become more cautious and aware thinkers themselves while still guiding them. It takes work, but it can be done. So I'm going to leave on that note. And I would like to know in the comments section, have any of you experienced coming close with someone that had the characteristics of a pedophile, that is a pedophile, or a sexual predator? Have any of you ever experienced that with yourself or with your children? Leave your answer in the comments. If you have any questions, leave that in the comments as well. I'll be getting back to my comments and my questions as soon as possible. Um, it's time to move forward more aware. It's time. That time is now. And I leave you all in peace. I hope you all have a wonderful day. And I look forward to speaking with you more soon. Peace and blessed be, guys.